91 as of last week. So definitely some massive growth it's in all facets of the business, but also significantly international. And here locally, here in New England, we originally, when I came to Exabeam 3 years ago, I was the only guy here. We've got like 6 people here in New England itself, so we've grown quite considerable. So what I plan to do is kind of go through kind of what is, what are some of the challenges customers have, how Exabeam helps customers, and we'll also have some chances to take questions and show you a brief demo of the product. The goal here is not to sell you on the technology in this hour frame. We just want to spark your interest around our technology to have either a deeper conversation, or you might have an interest in doing a pilot with Exabeam, which is at no cost to you. But we do pilots quite often to prove out the technology, and customers are really excited to see what we can do and help them. So a couple of things about what we're seeing in the space itself. The security, information, and event management space is actually getting very interesting. I've got a 20-year career in SIEM, and a lot of things are transforming it. And I kind of break it down into 3 areas. There's definitely a lot of questions around data lakes. There's a lot of discussion and customers looking for ways that they want to extract more data from their, or more analytics from their logs. Gartner came out with a term called UEBA, User Entity Behavior Analytics. And then the last one is a topic called SOAR, which is Security Orchestration and Automated Response. There's no surprise that finding good analysts is hard to do. So customers are looking to automate a lot of actions that the analyst does on a daily basis to make them more efficient, especially if some of the tasks that they do are repetitive, or they have different skill sets with their analysts. So, one of the things that I want to talk about just before we dive into Exabeam is, we look at it 3 different types of problems. A lot of customers have a data problem. The vendor that they use today, they charge by consumption or volume. So you have like a 100 gig license, and you can't go over 100 gig without paying more money. And as a result, these customers have large log bills, and that's really a big challenge. I have a lot of conversations, and Ron and the team here have a lot of conversations, and customers will say, I can't log everything because it's too expensive. And what that leads to is gaps in your analysis. So that's really one of the big problems that we help customers solve. The second one is just really the intelligence problem. A lot of the customers that we talk to, we ask them if are you happy with their SIEM? And it's usually 1 or 2 responses. It's usually a long pause, and it's not like yes. It's a long pause, and they kind of hum and haw, or they just blatantly, the other places, no, I'm not happy with it. And then we go into conversations like, okay, well, how many alerts do you get a day? And some of them will say 5,000 alerts a day. Well, how do you go through 5,000 alerts a day? And they said they don't. Or if I turned off your SIEM, what would you have? And they're like, well, it's just a glorified log server, but I can't log everything because it's too expensive. So it goes back to that other problem. The last piece that customers struggle with is just the expertise problem. So if you have, it goes back to the alert overload. You have a capability that is generating 5,000 alerts a day. You can think of it like, I'm a big puzzle guy. I like puzzles. So I'll buy like a 2,000 piece puzzle. More complicated, the better. My wife doesn't understand how I could be patient. But you have to take a lot of time. You work the border, and you actually have to slowly, maybe you got to look at colors, and you have to start piecing things together. And it's very, very difficult to do that. So customers are really struggling with that piece. And what you can see at the bottom is really where modern technology is focused on solving these areas through data enrichment, threat hunting, We hear a lot about customers doing incident timelines, which we'll talk about. And then we also talked about this security orchestration and automated response. And you hear a lot of words, customers talking about playbooks. So I have one build out slide here, which I think is helpful. I call this the day in the life of a SOC analyst. And you know what? It's interesting. Sometimes I'll talk to somebody about this and they're like, well, we use our SIEM for incident response and that's what we got. And when we start talking and peeling back what a SOC analyst does, we start seeing the pain problems. So if you look from left to right, your SIEM is supposed to ingest logs and you centralize it in your SIEM. You get an alert, you gather the evidence, you build a timeline, usually in WordPad or Excel, and then you respond to the attack, right? A SIEM is supposed to detect the threats that you don't have visibility in today. So the challenges that come through is some of the things I mentioned earlier. One of the ones that I think is really big and what really gravitated me to Exabeam with my expertise in this field helping customers is the second one. A lot of these tools out there, they're all rules based. So you actually have to write a rule for every alert you're trying to detect. You can't just go into the tool and go, I want to detect a red team. I want to detect a purple team. I want to detect a compromised credential. I want to detect lateral movement. You can't really do that, right? So a lot of the conversations we have with customers is, when's the last time you wrote a rule? Who writes rules? Do you even use the alerts that come out of your SIEM? And as you kind of go to the right, you start seeing this alert fatigue and this manual investigation with pieces missing. So this kind of gets into a little bit about transitioning to what Exabeam does and some of the value that we provide customers. Well, first of all, if you have a logging problem, we can solve a logging problem it's called Exabeam Data Lake, and it's unlimited logging with the same price every year. So a lot of customers, no surprise bills there. So if you have a logging problem, we can help solve it. This concept of behavior analytics, and not just about a user, but also an asset, is something that we have specialized in. That's what we started our company around, is behavior analytics. So we are by far the leader in that space from a deployment perspective and happy customers. We provide a lot of context around the alerts. A lot of customers that have a SIEM, they have an IP address and they have to translate the IP address to a machine to a user, and they have to do that all day long. And then they don't know if it's normal. Is it normal for that user or normal for that asset? And so I have a customer today that I steal his quote, and he mentioned to me is what I love about Exabeam is an alert without context is irrelevant. His process before he would have an alert from like Palo Alto and a wildfire or semantic endpoint or his DLP, and he would start his investigation there, and it would be all manually. So we've been able to really help him with our incident timelines, which is another key capability of our product. And then lastly, if you are looking to automate, like for example, if you have malware and you want us to detonate a file, and like Cuckoo, if you have a Cuckoo server, or you want us to look up things in VirusTotal or look things up in CrowdStrike or some of these other technologies you might have, we can automate a lot of these response, even isolate an IP address on your network. So at a very, very high level, we help customers in these three ways. Keep in mind, some customers don't want us to help them in all three areas. Maybe they already have logging licked. Maybe they don't want to replace their SIEM fully, and that's okay. Just like a lot of customers that might have multiple firewall technologies, some of our customers will say, oh, I already have a logging infrastructure, but I really need you guys to improve threat detection because my logging infrastructure is just logging. So we can actually help customers in certain areas, so you don't actually have to feel like it's an all or nothing solution. Some customers look at us as a SIM augmentation. Some customers look at us as a SIM replacement. Some customers are just greenfield. They've never invested in a SIM before. They're still out there. I worked with a client here in Connecticut. They've never invested in a SIM before, and they feel like they dodged some bullets, and they didn't actually have to go through the pain of deploying a technology that they felt like it was going to be obsolete. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the specific components of Exabeam, and then talk about some of the deployment options. So the first thing is that we have something called Exabeam Data Lake. Hint, hint. It's kind of cool. People are talking about data lakes. So we thought that was a good term for our technology. Like I mentioned earlier, it's unlimited. You also have the ability to get data from the cloud. A lot of these customers that have, I'm working with a client here in Boston. He's had a SIM for 3 years, and they've gravitated a lot of things to the cloud. They use cloud applications like Box or SharePoint and Azure, and they got things like Okta, and that stuff's not in their SIM today. So we have got this capability that we can bring in data that not just sits on-prem, but also solely in the cloud as well. And that's a big benefit to a lot of customers. The next piece is, I like to say, that's the behavior analytics product of our solution. Now keep in mind, you can still do fact-based rules in our product. So if you're like one of those old school guys, or even new school guys, and you still want to do, hey, if I see this happened 5 times, generate an alert, we can definitely do that. We don't disassociate that capability with our solution. We can still do that level of inspection and correlation rules within our product. But this piece is really transforming what I like to call is behavior analytics. How do you know what is happening on a system if you don't know what's normal on that system? And that's what's different about this piece of our technology is we create models, which we'll get into, and we'll show that into the demo. We do models for users. We use models for assets. And we also have something called Threat Hunter, which a lot of customers are trying to get into now, is instead of going to their SIM and running queries and then pivoting on that query, they do threat hunts within Exabeam, and again, with the context is pretty nice. The last piece is our orchestration and response. This is where we can do actions and playbooks. There's like over 200 actions, all these playbooks that we have within our technology. Let it be phishing, malware, departed employee. We want to, as a threat intelligence, there's all these different playbooks that we have in our technology. So there's a couple ways you can deploy Exabeam. Customers are like, hey, this sounds great. Sounds too good to be true. And when customers say it sounds too good to be true, we say, well, let's pilot it, right? You don't just, we can definitely prove out the technology, but there's different ways you can deploy it. It can be a virtual appliance. We can give you an AMI. You can actually have a physical appliance that we can sell you. You could actually have it hosted by Exabeam. Customers like, hey, I don't want any infrastructure at all. I want you guys to host everything and have software as a service. We can do that. It is single tenant, so there's no commingling of data from other customers, which customers are always concerned about. All secure communications between your data centers and Exabeam. You also have the option to run this in your own private cloud. I've got lots of customers. Personally, I've got customers running in Azure and AWS. Actually, I'm not sure. I know we've got customers running in Google, but from my experience, I've got AWS customers and Azure customers running Exabeam in their private cloud. So I'll take a quick pause and see if there's any questions that pop up before I kind of continue on a few more slides. I know I'm about 20 minutes in. All right, so we'll continue. All right, so I put this in here because there's no surprise of some of the technologies we're going after. Yeah, I've worked for several myself. Some of these legacy technologies you might have heard of, like ArcSight and IBM QRadar, some of these McAfee Nitro. I mean, some of these products, I think Nitro kind of is end of life to their technology. I haven't heard anybody buy an ArcSight in probably 4 years. One of the things that we really run into sometimes, and our biggest competitor is definitely Splunk. And there's no reason. Obviously it's a vendor out there that we integrate really nicely with. If you do own Splunk, but some customers will be like, hey, I've got Splunk, but I have ES and I don't like enterprise security. Or I have Splunk base and I need better visibility. Or some customers might say, hey, I don't like the way they license the product. We want to replace it, which we have done. So these are some of the key capabilities across some of the vendors, or some of the capabilities that we kind of focus on. And one of the things I like about Exabeam is I was pretty careful before I came to the company. I wanted to know, a lot of things like, how did we come up with this technology? Who thought of this? What customers do we have? How are they using it? This is before I joined the company. One of the things I did learn was back in 2013, we had design customers, design partners before we went GA. And we basically sat in their data centers and we sat with the analysts and said, what do you spend all your time doing? And they're like, well, we're trying to stitch the story together. We like I mentioned earlier, we're trying to build timelines. We're getting alert from FireEye or whatever, and then we're trying to figure out what happened before, what happened after. Is it normal for that user or that asset? So we kind of looked at this, or I translate all day. I translate an IP to a machine, machine to a user, IP to a machine, machine to a user, all day. And we're like, well, why don't we just do that automatically? And we kind of built our product in the SOCs for a whole year. They let us live in their network and live in their SOC for a year, learn, build, get feedback, and that's really what turned out to be the Exabeam product today, which I think is really good. I don't like technology that, hey, let's just try it and throw it against the wall. Hopefully people like it. We kind of really understood the analyst pain, and we looked at ways to fix it. So I kind of put together a couple of use cases and customers and how they're using our product. I would say by far our biggest vertical, we sell to all verticals, education, manufacturing. Typically when it comes to cybersecurity, there's no mystery about financial services. Banks, they're our largest vertical that we sell to, but we've got a ton of healthcare. We have a ton of insurance customers, a lot of even retail customers. One of the things I liked about the Allergan use case is you can go to YouTube and go to Allergan and Exabeam. You can watch a video of their CISO. This is a customer that is doing a lot of, they do a lot of acquisitions and divestitures. So they're all over the place. They got vendors, contractors, and one of the things that's cool about them is you can see the second bullet, identified a compromised credential among a group of trusted employees. We did that during a pilot. So I talk a lot about, proof is in the pudding. And this is something that a customer will have every technology under the sun. And, we were the technology that did detect it for Allergan. And really, if you think about it, I was talking to a colleague of mine, and he said that I got a customer is asking for my opinion. Called me yesterday out in North Carolina. He's like, I have a customer that's really concerned about external threats. They want to know when things were happening on their firewall. And I'm like, well, and he's like, I'm trying to teach the customer to kind of get out of this old thinking, like a firewall should block traffic. And really, if it's a threat after you, who's the adversary? What are they after? Why would a nation state be after a large company? For a company like some customers that have been breached before, they kind of scratch their head and they're wondering why is that? And some of these customers are trying to build dossiers off of like a Facebook of your employees and your vendors. They're trying to understand that like me, Brian, Izzy, my brother's Mark, he's got these nephews, and they're trying to build that dossier. So there's different reasons why customers get targeted. But what I liked about Elegant is that they did a video case study, which you can read, but also, if somebody is going to, detect an outside threat, they're not actually, it could be a denial of service, I get that, but they're not after the user, they're after the credential. That's what they're after. They're after what that credential has access to. So if for the folks that are on the call, think about the technologies you have today and ask yourself, how do I detect a compromised credential? How do I know that one user account has not been compromised? Or how do I know that I have an internal employee that is doing something that they shouldn't be? Maybe they're exfiltrating information. How do I detect that today? And we talk about lateral movement. Those are some things that you might want to ask yourself. And in reality, it's the top two things, right? So you really need to look at that. I'll use an analogy like, the number one reason for divorce in the United States today is money fights and money problems. Well, get on the same page with your spouse. And if you got money, you can fix that, then you fix the biggest problem. So in your network and cybersecurity, kind of look at the top two things: compromised credentials, lateral movement. Those are the top two things that should be detected. If you don't have those protections in place, you're kind of really missing out on and really helping out your company. So a couple other ones. This is this company just went public. Levi's. I think they've been in business for 100 years. One of the things that they did is they had some cloud applications, as you can see, like GitHub, and they're looking at us for potential. We detected some data exfiltration from some departed employees from a cloud-based application, and it's interesting because this customer was terminated. They actually stopped his access, but they didn't really do a good job of cleaning up all his access, and he had access to a lot of other systems, cloud applications. And since we were bringing in cloud applications, we were able to say, well, why is this person that is no longer has a disabled account, but still has access, is still accessing your network? We have a departed employees analytics. We also have some really cool analytics around, we call levers and slackers. We can do some predictive analytics around, this user or this system is acting inappropriately, and they might be looking to leave the company, or maybe the system is exfiltrating information which we've never seen before. This is a manufacturing customer. A lot of customers talk about things like pass the hash or Mimikatz or just other things. This is another customer that are looking to look at like lateral movement, right? So that would be a manufacturing customer. This is vendor too, right? So we've got some vendors. This is an example of Citrix. Again, some customers will approach me and say, hey, we have our SIEM, but you know what? We just made an acquisition, and I'm really nervous about bringing this. It's going to be wild, wild west, and I'm looking for Exabeam to kind of stitch that story together because I just don't have a really good way of doing that, and I need a win for the CIO. I need a win for my CISO, and sometimes it's a win for the board, right? That's what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to provide time to value quickly without saying, hey, remember that tool we bought and a year later, 18 months, it didn't work, right? It's just logging, it doesn't tell us anything. So we're really trying to bring that information to the forefront. Cool company, Hulu. I think this is the last one. What I liked about Hulu is really kind of drove to me. This is the customer that had a SIEM. It wasn't that we didn't have the logs, we had those. But we were in many different locations. We took our analysts lots of time to actually dig in the logs and find them and put a story together. With Exabeam, it actually provides us with a story. And if you think about, remember that TV show CSI? Maybe I'm dating myself, I'm 47. But that TV show CSI, it kind of started off with like an event, like a murder. And then it was an hour-long show, and the first 50 minutes was all the investigation. They're digging into the story, they're digging into this, digging into that, turning over rocks. And then the last like 5 minutes was the big reveal. That's kind of what Hulu was going through, is they spent all their time putting the story together, and at the end of the day, it was a dead end, or it was a ghost. Hey, I see somebody's locked out of their PC. Oh, it's an IP address. Let me translate the IP to machine to a user. Oh, it's Brian Izzy. Oh, what happened before? What happened after? Let me run queries. I don't know if I got all the information. And all of a sudden it says like, oh, Brian Izzy locked out of his own PC. Well, what value is that, right? So what Exabeam would do is like, hey, Brian Izzy locked out of an asset that he's never previously logged into before, or nobody in his peer group. And oh, by the way, we had 100 failed logins, but we expected 3. So we build these models for Brian Izzy, or a vendor, or a contractor, or an executive, or a privileged account, or a system, understanding what's normal, and we see deviations from those normals. We stitch the story together. So I think this is the last one, is a Gartner quadrant. There's no surprise. Everyone looks at things like this, and sometimes customers are like, I don't believe it. What I liked about the Gartner quadrant is there's 2 vendors that I've heard of that have gone from not being on the quadrant at all to being a visionary and being a leader. One is Palo Alto Networks. So one year they were never on it, then they were a visionary, and then they were a leader. Exabeam was the other one. We went from not on the quadrant, we were a visionary last year, and we moved into leadership status. And as you can look at the right-hand side, so if you look at the graph, you know, is kind of sales. There's no surprise. IBM and Splunk, they do more selling. They've got more people in the field. They've been around a lot longer. Customers, you know, update and renew. But what I look at is the things to the right is that, is your completeness of vision. What is your technology telling you? What is your technology providing? And, if you think of some of these customers out there that have been around for a couple of years, you can see that Exabeam is kind of really, we're talking about analytics. We're talking about security orchestration. We're talking about context. And we're becoming like a leader and not just a follower. And now we're starting to see some of our competitors come back and using the same type of terminologies that we do, and kind of, saying, hey, it's working for Exabeam. We need to do that too. And I think that's really just a validation that we're doing some really good things right. So, I'm just going to close out of that. And then, was there any questions? I'll just take a quick pause because I think we're halfway through. Was there a question? All right, I guess not. All right, so hey, Ron Collins, are you there? I think is he on mute? Is he muted, Ron? I don't know if Ron wants to run.
He was, but me.
Okay. So maybe some folks might not want to hear me speak anymore. Hopefully you guys like my analogies.
I like them.
All right.
I do have, I'll ask you the questions that we had. Let's see here. I think some of these you've already touched on, but it might be a good review. Do you have to set up parsers to search through logs in the Exabeam data lake?
Okay. So we've got about 700 parsers already with our product. You don't need to set up any parsers if they're already there. I think usually what customers will end up saying is, hey, I've got a custom application you've never heard of before. Do I need to write a parser? We actually do parsers for free. So some of our customers will say it's a professional services engagement. And we've got SLAs with our customers that we have to turn around a parser. I think it's in like 3 days. So, but it does not cost you anything.
Okay. And then I have one more, and I think you touched on this too. Can you integrate external sources with Exabeam Incident Responder?
Absolutely. So the Incident Responder, like I mentioned, does playbooks. And a playbook is a combination of actions. I can show you some of the actions that we have within the product. Like it could be detonate a file, look up URL. If you want to write your own custom actions, you want to use PowerShell or Bash, you can write your own scripts and and put those into the technology. If it's vendor focused, like somebody would be like, hey, I got ServiceNow. I want you guys to open up a ticket or close a ticket. That came up like a year ago or maybe 2 years ago. And we say, oh, that's a good one. Let's write it. So we write it, and then everybody benefits from it. But if it's something unique to you that you want to do, we can teach you how to fish, to write your own actions, and integrate that into the product without issue.
Okay.
Right.
I think I promoted Ron, so he should be.
Yep.
We've allowed you to speak now, Ron.
Yeah, there you go.
Go for it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So Ron, do you want to share out your screen and go through some of these, some of the parts of the product, or do you want to? I'm not sure if you can take control of my PC.
Yep, I just need to bring it up.
Okay. I thought it'd be a nice way to break up. You know, we work as teams here, so you know it's kind of like Iron Man, man. You can't just be the only guy. Let me just stop sharing. There was another question I saw while Ron's doing that. Can you explain how the unlimited logging a little bit more? How does it work in a SaaS model if we host it in our own Azure cloud? So if it's hosted by Exabeam, you don't have anything to worry about. So you have basically a cost, it's a subscription. And if you're at 5,000 EPS and you need to go to 10,000 EPS, and there's nothing for you to deal with. We actually extend your environment, and you're not on the hook to provide that infrastructure. So that actually handles the SaaS model. If you actually host in your own Azure cloud, we would actually give you the appropriate specs to build it correctly. It's kind of like a house, like I don't know, Lincoln Logs or Jenga. You want to get the base really good. You want to make sure you set it up right. So we'll kind of look at what you have today, if you have something, and build it appropriately, and then, but not point you in a corner where you don't know how to extend it. So we have a customer that I know of. It's a large manufacturing customer. They started off with a 10 node cluster in Data Lake. They tried to actually build their own data lake, and they ran into a lot of challenges. So they started off with a 10 node cluster with Exabeam, and I think they're up to 30 now. They have a 30 node cluster all running in their private cloud. Again, it didn't cost them licensing from Exabeam to extend it, but obviously I'm sure you have some internal costs to spin up an Azure instance. But it's not like you're like, hey, I need to, extend my license in Azure, and I've got an internal chargeback, and oh, here comes another gigantic bill from my vendor for logging. So there was another question that just popped up. Is your SaaS solution HIPAA compliant? One of the things that I like to talk about is transparency. I don't know the answer to that question, but I can definitely track that out. I don't want to give you a false hope or oversell. So, but I'll take that as I've heard some other types of compliance like SOC 2.0 and all that stuff, but I'll have to track that one down. A good question. You get the T-shirt, I guess. We'll have to send you a T-shirt.
No, it is a good question. I actually just got that asked on an RFI I was working on, and I had to assign it to one of the folks on our the gentleman who runs the SaaS our SaaS offering, and I don't know. I haven't checked it since like yesterday, so I didn't have an answer just yet. Otherwise, I would have been really prepared and looked good. But
I'm going to go to mute. I'm going to go to mute now. I saw the other question here. It was another certification question. Let me see if I can get an answer before 10 o'clock today. So over to Ron.
Okay. Yeah, so I like Brian, I spent a lot of time working in the SIEM space, prior to a few years ago when I joined Exabeam. One of the reasons that I gravitated towards this space was, when we were talking to our prospects and even customers, it was all, with legacy SIEM technology, and, I use the word legacy in kind of air quotes, it was all about, what could you bring into the platform? It wasn't really much about, besides like things like compliance reporting and that sort of thing, some, basic alerting, what did you want to get out of the platform? So what would happen, is the SIEMs get brought in, and they're basically just a giant log aggregation place. You got people trying to tune them, trying to get rid of the 5,000 alerts that they're seeing on a daily basis, and make, find some value in the technology. The thing with Exabeam was, the time to value in what we could show in a very short period of time was really what kind of brought me over to this company, and it's only gotten better since I've been here. So if you're familiar with legacy SIEM solutions, typically what you're seeing is, charts, graphs, tables with lots of IPs and lots of different severity levels of alerting and alerts and things like that. If you look at Exabeam, the way that we work is, we either, help you from the foundational piece, which is using our data lake to get all your logs in a single location, and then feeding it into our analytics piece. Or you, like Brian said, you may have, and be happy with, something like a Splunk or a QRadar or a logarithm, that, some existing SIEM technology you spend a ton of time putting in place, and you're comfortable with it, and that's fine too, because what you can then do is layer our analytics on top of that. And so what you're not going to see with Exabeam is pretty much what I just described, with lists of tables and things like that. You see people and you see scores. So the way that we work is we integrate with your Active Directory. So we pull in context information about, your environment, whether it's assets, whether it's service accounts, whether it's users in the environment. And then we baseline, their behavior. So what do they do every day that whether they're VPNing in, connecting to cloud applications, or working on the local area network. What are they doing on their day-to-day basis? What applications do they touch? Everything about that particular user, we end up creating a baseline for. And then we understand, we've got rules and models in place, and I'll show you what I mean when I say a model, to assign risk to behavior that is outside of that known baseline. So, picking on somebody in this list here, this is what we call notable users. A notable user is somebody whose behavior has accumulated 90 points of risk or more. And that's typically the way that, where our analysts start their day. There's enough information, with this user's time, session that you want to maybe take a look at it. And the cool thing is, taking a look at it is not an exercise in hunting and pecking and using Notepad to find 10 or 15 different things. Everything is there for you. So let me click on this user here, Barbara Salazar. So I clicked on a user. I could have clicked on her score and gone right into her timeline, but I want to understand who I'm dealing with. If I'm an analyst, I want to know, give me some context about this user. So if you ever looked at a baseball card, this is kind of the back of the baseball card kind of view of who am I dealing with? I know who she is. I can see what accounts she's actually used. I know where she works. I know what her role is, her department. I've got her manager contact details. I can see, is this a new account? Is it somebody that's been around for a while? Is it a full-time account? Is the account active or dormant or disabled? And we also know her peer groups. Because if I'm baselining behavior and the user's behavior is already bad, how do I tell what's bad? How do I tell their behavior is bad? We compare it to both the peers and the organization. And that tends to bubble up bad behavior very quickly. In this case, this has our case management and incident response piece built in, our demo system does. So I see actually incidents that are associated with this user, and I can see what the status is. She's got 3 active incidents and 1 from the past 30 days. Now, if I scroll down this page even further, I've got a risk trend. What this basically does is tells me, how risky is this user over time? is this somebody, if I flip this out for a month, how risky is this user typically? Is she somebody that's always on the notable users list, or is it somebody that, in this case, like I said, like you can see here, there was a couple of incidents prior leading up to it, but, all of a sudden spiked a pretty high score. And then if I look down here, this gives me a version of what happened during that session that caused her to accumulate that amount of risk. And you can see credential switch, uploaded a lot of data during a VPN session, first time active from a country, from this country, the Ukraine. Not only that, but for the entire organization, we've never seen anybody come in from the Ukraine. First device we've seen on the network, associated with this user. And then if I go down here, there's all different types of risks. But the cool thing is I can come right in here and I can click on the timeline. Now, the timeline is basically what a company like a Mandiant would do, would build out if you had an incident. It's also what your analysts try to do, but they have to go to 4 or 5 different consoles to stitch this together. We do this every day for every user in the environment, every user, every asset in the environment. So in this case, her day starts at 5:52 with the VPN login from the Ukraine. Pretty innocuous event. Your SIEM probably wouldn't flag something like this, but because we're modeling her information and we know what's normal for her, it's the first time she's seen any, she's been active from the Ukraine. And this is what a model is. So her baseline is this. We've seen her come in from the United States 34 times. We're very confident in this model. We've got enough data points that we've got good confidence in this model. This is the only time that we've seen her active from the Ukraine. So that's why she was, we didn't write a rule saying, notify me if anybody connects with a VPN from the Ukraine. It doesn't work like that. Because we know that she's never connected from the Ukraine, she gets 20 points of risk. Not only that, but it's the first time anybody in the organization has ever done a VPN connection from the Ukraine. And then as you can see, there's additional things based on this event that we model. We've never seen this ISP, we've never seen this device, never seen this source IP, her peer group right here, that added some risk here. And then, as I scroll down the timeline, I start to see some other abnormalities kind of stand out. She starts moving, laterally in the network. She connects to systems that she's never accessed before. I then see her log into a system that she's never logged into before. This is a cool one because I see her do an account switch. She actually does like a right-click run as and changes credentials to the SA account. I've never seen her do that before. Not only that, that SA account is what's considered a privileged account. So she's just logged into a system that I've never seen her touch before and done a credential switch to a privileged account. Now, most SIEMs have a hard time tracking this. We maintain state, we call it stateful user tracking. So we understand that, even though the right-click run has happened and now the events taking place going forward are done by SA. SA is actually Barbara Salazar or Barbara Salazar's account. So we keep it in the same timeline, so you don't have to try to guess what happened or maintain 2 separate timelines if you're doing an investigation. I then see her do a remote log on to this SQL server, and again it's got the account switch, so she's logging in as SA, and then she starts doing some database activity where she's looking at different databases. She does a database query on payroll, very large database query. So basically she drops the database, the payroll database here. Then I see her connect to a file sharing website. Then I see her exfiltrate the data, right here up to that file sharing website. Then at the end of the day, her session ends. We've seen her upload, data to the web before, but it's been, around 27K, 28K, that's her baseline. In this case, she uploaded almost 0.5 terabytes worth of data. So this is the type of thing. I can go through, some additional use cases within the demo system, but so that's what Exabeam does. We build out timelines for every user in the environment. We flag risk based on behavior and not correlation rules. We do it for users, we do it for assets, each one of these cards here is what we call a watch list. You can, build out your own watch list. I've got clients with watch lists for things like contractors, vendors, upcoming terminations that they'll get from HR. In this case, service accounts, lockouts. We model lockout events. Is somebody locking out of their own system? Not really a big deal. They can contact the help desk and get their account, unlocked. Or is somebody actually, attempting to brute force systems all around my network? That's something that I want to look at. So we'll model that and show you an orange lock instead of a green lock. Executives, we track your executives. They're high value targets. That's automatically done and is set up during the actual setup of the application. If you want,
Ron, can I just jump in here for a quick minute, because I know we got about 9 minutes left.
Yep.
I think one of the things what is a big difference is I mentioned earlier in my presentation is bringing a win to an executive, right? So a lot of information security managers or directors or CISOs, they report to a CIO, a CTO, and a CEO. And, you can't really just give them a bunch of, you want to actually answer the question that they're going to ask is, are we okay? Right. And that's really the big answer. That's a big question. Are we okay? And you really can't go back to them and say, well, let me show you what I have. And I've got 1,000 alerts. Well, if you have not investigated those 1,000 alerts, you can't answer that question. So one of the things I like about what I've seen with my customers is that, they bring this interface to an executive and show this to them. And I'm not saying it's, we do a pilot, it's one day, right? But, with a matter of weeks, you're showing results, right? It's not, and some customers that already have data it could be days, but in some cases I don't like to overpromise and underdeliver. But really it goes back into that thing where it says notable users and notable assets. So you look at this as this is something that's manageable. I mean, we look at how many things can my team handle, and some customers actually have technology and they were hoping to get this, or they don't get any alerts from their technology today. Or they're completely useless. So one thing I think it's also nice is the integration of, Ron, can you go through like a timeline? Can you just click on someone's timeline and show how you can kind of pivot back into the raw data? So
yeah, I was actually going to go there.
I just want to show you some of the integrations that we have. So right there, you can click on that and it'll pull the query. If you want to look at the raw data, you have the ability to do that within the product. So a lot of customers, they start off with the raw data and then they're trying to put the puzzle pieces together. With us we'll show you the puzzle completed, but if you want to break up the puzzle and you want to go to the different pieces, you can do this through this really cool click through. The other one I wanted to show real quick is some of the playbooks. There were some questions that came up about playbooks. Maybe Ron, you can show that real quick on the interface.
Yep. Close this out here. This is an incident. This incident was determined to be a phishing incident. So this was, created and is now an active case. You've got everything, where the incident started, what technology, flagged the incident, different things, the URL if you want to access the URL. What it is, artifacts. So you've got all the different actors in the incident. This is the evidence that I collected. For my analysts, we keep an activity log. So you can, if you've got multiple people working a case, you can easily see what each person has done. They can communicate to each other if they're not in the same location via the case comments. In this case, if I wanted to run a playbook, I do this. I say, all right, let's click the workbench. And then if I want to run individual actions, it could be, detonate an attachment in a sandbox. It could be run a URL against something like Anomaly or ThreatStream or VirusTotal to see if it's a low-ranked URL. Or I can run a playbook. Playbook is just a series of actions that will automatically run. And in here, I can take this, I can click what we call a phishing playbook. And if I hit launch here, so now this is going to start to go through and put together all the actions that I built, into that playbook. So this is, looking at the different links in the URL. You can see on the left-hand side here every action it's taking. So it's getting the URL reputation. It's detonating the file that it found. It's scanning the file. It's running expert phishing rules against it. It's doing a text scan on the actual email. It's getting the file reputation.
One thing I like, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ron. One thing I like about this one is I have a customer, and obviously there's some technologies in here that you may or may not own. VirusTotal's free, right? But one would be like, we have a phishing problem within our company, and like somebody gets phished. They sent, like, I'm an employee, I work for a company. This is one of my customers. There's an inbox they have called phishing@thisnameofthiscompany.com. So I'm an employee. I feel like I'm being phished. They send an email to this phishing alias. Then what this product does, you don't need to go through the interface and click it. It just automatically does it. It'll grab things that are automatically sent to that inbox. You don't need to go to our Exabeam interface and start clicking buttons. It will run a series of steps to see if actually it is phishing. One of the actions toward the end of the playbook for this customer, this is built into the product, is it actually, if it is phishing, it will go into their Office 365, actually quarantine. I think actually they delete the email, right? So before other people open it. So that's really the nice capability of this, of the promise of this orchestration and automation is the automation, because I don't have staff to do it. But also when we talk to customers about creating a case, an incident, like, okay, well, you have an incident within your company. Where do you store all the information? Oh, we put it in Excel, or we don't have a case management system. So we actually have that built into the product itself, which is really, really nice. So I know we're up against our time. Ron, thank you so much for going through the demo here. And I guess I'll go back to Atlantic Data Security to kind of wrap us up here.
Thank you so much, guys. We really appreciate your time here.